So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. It was an easy to read thriller with Black Mirror vibes and plenty of twists. Hi everyone, my name is Terry Westwell and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our Panic at the Book Club book of the week, which is The Passengers by John Marrs. If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, that way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. We also accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message. 8 self-drive cars set on a collision course. Who lives? Who dies? You decide. When someone hacks into the system of 8 self-drive cars, their passengers are set on a fatal collision course. The passengers are a TV star, a pregnant woman, a disabled war hero, an abused wife fleeing her husband, an illegal immigrant, husband and wife parents of 2 who are travelling in separate cars, and a suicidal man. Now the public have to judge who should survive. But are the passengers all they first seemed? First, we'll discuss any spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. As usual, let's start with those chapter lengths. They were all fairly reasonable, however, they were really inconsistent. Some of them were super short, while others were like maybe a 15-minute or so read, which is probably why there were so many of them. I think there were around 70 chapters in this book. But having such varied chapter lengths worked really well for this book. It meant that you got snippets of what was going on, but you wouldn't get the full picture until you were meant to. And perhaps because of that, and because it was so easy to read, I didn't mind the multiple perspectives. In something like this, having all those different POVs was such an important part of the book. It's definitely what keeps you hooked and influences how you feel about each character. It was done really well. I always think that having so many perspectives, you risk the story getting lost, overly complicated, and personally for me, I find that I often care a whole lot less about the characters. However, I think that this one was a great example of multiple POVs done really well in a way that aids the story and still maintains to be something that is really easy to read and follow. The book also jumps into things pretty immediately. It draws you in really quickly, with the first few chapters being about the passengers getting into their vehicles only to discover that they've been hacked. I think the book maintains a fairly fast pace that really keeps you gripped. This one is a bit of a different read for me, but if I had to compare it to any of the books, it would probably be The Maid by Nita Prose, or perhaps 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. Although it has to be said that I do prefer how John Marrs did his multiple POVs rather than how Liane Moriarty did it, mostly because The Passengers is a much faster paced book, so if you are considering reading 9 Perfect Strangers after this video, then be warned, it is a much slower paced book. Now moving on to that part of the video where I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first, because beyond this point there will definitely be spoilers. At the beginning of each chapter, you got this clip that was relevant to what was going on, and I really liked that. I think my favourites were probably the Spotify playlist and what was essentially a BuzzFeed quiz on if you were trapped in your vehicle, which passenger would you be? I just really liked that. I read this book on my Kindle, and I think that element worked really well either on an ebook or as a physical book, but I'm not really sure how it would work for audio. Like, it would be a total shame not to include it. I just feel like it might feel a little bit more like a disruption to the story. I don't know. I think out of all of the parts that I highlighted in this book, most of them were to do with Jack. I don't know why his character just got under my skin. Out of all of the characters, he was one of the worst. Obviously, he was very well written. He was like the King Joffrey of this whole damn book. I can't say that I was even remotely sorry for what happened to him in the end. I think this book did a really good job of changing your opinion and how you felt about each character as you learnt more about them. With the pregnant woman Claire, I started off, feeling suspicious of her, but ultimately feeling quite bad for her. Then you find out that she's got her husband's body in the boot of her car, and like most of the characters in the book, my sympathy for her definitely lessened. But then you find out the truth during Claire's POV, and I'm back to feeling more sympathetic for her again. I think it did a good job of showing the book's point that you can't just judge someone based on part of the information, even though we did have more information than most of the characters in the book. I mean, the first chapter starts with Claire's to-do list, which was to program Ben's car to go to work, book an Uber under a guest account, not using her own name, and go to work. Start messaging Ben around mid-morning before calling his boss around midday. I mean, that obviously sounds really suspicious, but I didn't even get close to guessing what really happened. I mean, even Sophia the Star, after her POV, yes, what she did was absolutely horrible, but you could see this broken woman who had made these terrible decisions and couldn't figure a way out of it. I don't know, even though there's absolutely no excusing her behaviour, I was still able to feel some sympathy for her. For Sam and Heidi, the characters were kind of saying that Heidi was just as bad as her husband Sam, but in what reality? I'm sorry, but just absolutely not. During this whole book, Sam was just an absolute garbage person. Obviously, what Heidi did was wrong, but I can totally imagine wanting to get payback in that sort of situation. And she may have been dishonest, but it wasn't to the scale of having a whole secret second family for years. Even going as far as to name your children the same so that you don't get mixed up between the families. Like, imagine finding out that not only has your dad got a whole secret second family, but your half-sibling actually has the same name as you. Anyway, although I could see the reasoning behind Heidi's behaviour, there was just no excuse for Sam. And his POV didn't do a thing to affect my opinion on the matter. In fact, it may have only reassured my beliefs that he is in fact a garbage person. I really liked Libby's character development, and after everything that poor woman went through, I think that was a really important part for the book to focus on. I mean, the dark romance reader in me wouldn't have been too disappointed if Libby just ran away with Jude/Noah, but I did like that triple twist that it was in fact Noah's brother Alex, and Libby stuck up for herself and her beliefs. Libby changed so much from that timid character in the beginning, and I did like her official ending with Matthew at the end of the book, but I think it's worth noting that, especially for a thriller, it wasn't really necessary. And especially with just how much her character had grown, I mean, I don't feel like it was necessary that in order for this character to have a happy ending, she needed to get married and be pregnant. You know, I get that being pregnant or being a parent or choosing not to be was a pretty big topic of conversation in this book. However, I don't know, there's just more things that women want in life. You know, perhaps it would have been nice to have a female character in this book that wasn't either pregnant or already a parent, and not just because, you know, it's a bad idea to have a child with your pedo husband. You know, because pretty much every female character in this book was either pregnant at some point or already a parent. You know, it was nice that it pointed out that dads just don't get the same acknowledgement as mums, even if it was said by a garbage person, but his point was still valid. And the book stood up for same sex couples having children, but at the same time, it almost seemed to strongly lean on this whole idea that a woman's worth is strongly based on their ability to have children. When I was around 80% of the way through the book, I was quite surprised with just how much of the book I still had left. The book threw a lot of twists at us, and I can't say that I saw them all coming either. But when I'm reading, unless it's painfully obvious or the book is purposely trying to get you to guess what's going to happen at the end, I don't really put that much effort into trying to guess. Like, I can say that there were some twists that just weren't too surprising, like Jude having more to do with it than we initially thought wasn't too surprising, but I wasn't expecting him to be who he was. But I don't think there was really any realistic way that I could have anticipated that, because it was just wrapped up in so many twists. So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. It was an easy to read thriller with Black Mirror vibes and plenty of twists. The book immediately throws you into the story, and I think it had a great ending. So will I be reading any more of John Mars? Absolutely. In fact, I already have one or two of his other books on my TBR. I enjoyed just how easy his writing was to read, and I'm certainly more intrigued to try and read more books centered around this sci-fi future technology. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? Gemma said that this is absolutely amazing. She loved it and it is a must read. It's fast paced and it's a page turner you just won't be able to put down. It's a unique story and she can safely say she's not read anything like it. Gemma believes that if it ever came to it, she would also be against driverless cars. She felt sorry for Libby, and that only worsened as she realised that she knew one of the passengers. She also agrees that Jack is in fact a douchebag. The book also brought up an interesting link between social media and people's actions in real life, how it's easy to do and say things that you wouldn't ordinarily do and say. This book got a well-deserved 5 stars from Gemma, and she would highly recommend. Shelley said that she read this one as an audiobook. It was a great story with nice chapter lengths. She loved this idea of fully automated cars. That is until reading this book. It was really relatable in that you could kind of see the government covering up a story or two like this. At first, the passengers seemed chosen at random. That is until you discover the wrongdoings made by each individual. Then, to add the twist on how the hacker came up with the plan to teach the government a lesson, just made for great reading. Shelley said it was a great story with interesting characters, with each having different skeletons in their closets. She would definitely recommend this book. She really enjoyed the read and felt that it was hard to put down.
This week I read The Passengers for Panic at the Book Club, and it was nice to read a thriller, as I don't think I've read a thriller since I was like 14, so that was a nice change of pace. What I will say though is, while reading it, my main thought was, this would make a good TV show. But I might just be a bit uncivilized. I liked the fact that it was actually quite lightweight. Like, it could have been a lot darker and a lot deeper and all that, but I think the author made a good decision to let the reader kind of go as far down the rabbit hole as they wanted. The other thing that I think the author did really well was the main sort of plot line kind of ended a few chapters early, so you actually got quite a lot of good context of the aftermath and what happened next and all that, and I think that was really well done. I listened to the audiobook, and I will say that the Audible team, or whoever recorded it, put a lot of work into all the BuzzFeedy quiz and the news things. You got the ding 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 of like phones ringing and stuff, and that did actually like add an element to it that I did enjoy. I thought the characters were flushed out enough. I mean, maybe I'm just an unsympathetic individual. There was no one who I was desperately like, oh, they've got to be alive. I wish they were alive. But like, it was a really enjoyable story. It would have made a good TV show. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it on Netflix in a bit.
Hello, so I thought I would give you my thoughts on The Passengers by John Mars. I loved it. It's not the kind of thing that I would usually read. Like, I've read quite a few of John Mars' books. I think they're so gripping and just really interesting. I love that kind of near future. It's like, it's kind of bridging dystopian and real life, I think. And I just find that really interesting. Like, it's stuff that you can completely imagine really happening in the next few years. And the fact that it's in the UK as well, it's just very kind of not relatable, but stuff that you can really imagine happening. I enjoyed that. I thought it was really interesting how we got the backgrounds of the different characters and how we had to think for ourselves as the reader who deserves to live and who deserves to die in this thing that the hacker was giving them this ultimatum for the end. So I remember really liking how we get social media input from what's happening in the real world at the same time as well, because again, you can totally imagine that happening in real life. But yeah, overall, really, really enjoyed it. I really like his writing. I like that it's taking real life and just changing a couple of seemingly small things that you can totally imagine really happening, especially in the next, say, 5 years. And I think it's really clever how he writes. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5, which I stand by. And I would definitely read more of his other stuff as he brings it out as well.
Next week, we'll be discussing Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. So don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday the 22nd of July at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok or Instagram. The following week there'll be no Panic at the Book Club, however we'll be picking back up on the 13th of August with The Serpent and the Wings of Night. But don't forget, if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below, along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye.